After touring the facilities, King Sejong offered high praise. "You've done an outstanding job," he said. "I won't hold back any resources to support this effort. Find a way to mass produce this gunpowder. I want to see the entire Joseon army equipped with these cutting-edge weapons as soon as possible." The crown prince smiled and replied, "I'll do my best, father." However, as the king looked at the pale faces and emaciated bodies of the craftsmen, his heart filled with concern. All of this is the result of their tireless labor, he thought. How much suffering must they have endured to become so thin? King Sejong then turned to General Choi and asked, "General Choi, can you explain the process of how these rifles are made?" With teary eyes and a passionate voice, General Choi responded, "Yes, Your Majesty. To forge these rifles, every single tool must first be tempered. Then, we flash back to an earlier time, when the Crown Prince had just begun the rifle production process. Two craftsmen were seen discussing his orders. One of them said, 'He wants us to make everything starting with an anvil made from steel.' The second craftsman replied, 'So we can't use the regular anvil we always use?' The first shook his head. 'I'm not sure, but that's his command. We don't have a choice.' Suddenly, a third craftsman shouted from the back, 'The materials ordered by His Highness have arrived. What's this, iron rods?' Without delay, the Crown Prince issued his instructions. 'Mr. Yoon, you'll be in charge of rolling the steel plates into shape. Mr. Sao, you'll insert the iron rod into the center of the hardened steel plate. Mr. Kim, you'll strike the object with another iron bar on top of the special anvil. If the gaps are fully filled, you'll need to sand them down until smooth. Please make sure the gaps are sealed properly.' All the craftsmen responded in unison. 'Yes, we understand.' With a serious look, the Crown Prince took a megaphone and ordered, 'Start the inspection now and make sure everything is going perfectly. Move quickly and get it done.' The craftsmen, working in a rush while constantly being scolded, felt like crying inside. 'How are we supposed to finish this?' one of them whispered. But thanks to their relentless effort, 5 prototype rifles were finally completed. The Crown Prince smiled with satisfaction and said, 'This is a masterpiece, born from your blood and sweat.' We now shift to Area 51. With a calm yet commanding tone, the Crown Prince gave his instructions. 'Let's begin the actual performance test. First, make sure this rifle can withstand the gunpowder.' He continued, 'The old rifle used 1 nyang of gunpowder. We'll start with half that amount.' The craftsman nodded in agreement, fully aware of how critical each step in the process was. No one dared to be careless. Everyone was laser-focused. General Choi then gave a sharp command. 'Fire!' 2 bullets burst from the barrel, cutting through the air. All eyes followed the bullet's path. The Crown Prince couldn't hide his curiosity. 'How did it go, General Choi?' With a mix of tension and excitement on his face, General Choi immediately reported, 'No issues with either the original gunpowder or the double-strength powder up to 1.5 nyang, but considering the rifle's primary function, I don't think we need to go up to 2 nyang.' The Crown Prince nodded, clearly satisfied. 'Good. Now let's reduce the powder gradually to find the most optimal amount. The effective range of the old rifle was 72 meters. Let's use that as our benchmark.' Multiple rifle tests were conducted under the Crown Prince's direct supervision, as he carefully calculated the best formula for the future of Joseon's military. Suddenly, Yi Cheon cheered as the results became clear. His bullet had struck the target dead-on at a distance of 72 meters. Judging by the power, it looked like it could go even farther. Though pleased, Hyang kept his composure. Of course, that was expected. Getting more excited, Yi Cheon quickly suggested, 'Then let's try 91 meters. This is getting exciting.' As the order was given, 2 more bullets fired with a thunderous bang, slicing through the air. A thin cloud of smoke slowly drifted upward, a faint trace of the deadly force just unleashed. Unable to contain his excitement, Yi Cheon shouted, 'Your Highness!' With just 7.5 grams of double-strength powder, the bullet hit the target at 126 meters. That's incredible! But the moment of joy quickly turned to concern. 'But this is only half a success,' General Choi said hesitantly. 'We've fired more than 20 rounds, but most missed. It seems the bullet's trajectory isn't stable. The accuracy is very low,' he added with sharp observation. As expected from General Choi, Hyang thought to himself. Then, in a firm voice, Hyang asked, 'But is that the only problem? Cleaning and reloading the rifle seems to take too much time. Why don't we try firing it without those 2 steps?' A bit startled, Yi Cheon asked, 'But if we do that, won't the bullet just fall out?' With a heavy atmosphere settling in, Hyang replied sternly, 'Then we simply need to craft bullets that fit perfectly into the barrel. Just try it.' 'Yes, Your Highness,' Yi Cheon responded, though inwardly muttering in annoyance. 'If you already knew the answer, why ask in the first place?' While the officials and craftsmen looked confused, the Crown Prince offered only a faint smile. 'It's better they discover it on their own, rather than me giving them the answer outright. Let them experience firsthand what I've already learned.' After some time testing the method suggested by the Crown Prince, General Choi reported, 'We've followed Your Highness's instructions, but the gunpowder residue is blocking the next shot.' The Crown Prince let out a soft sigh. 'So, cleaning is still necessary after all.' Hyang then tested General Choi with a question. 'Think carefully. On the battlefield, enemy cavalry will charge in fast. Will there be enough time to clean the barrel before firing again? General Choi fell silent. He searched for an answer, but could only give a small nod, quietly acknowledging the Crown Prince's point, his expression filled with shame. Next to him, Yi Cheon scratched his head in confusion, even though it wasn't itchy. The Crown Prince remained silent, disappointment creeping in. Should I step in again? Just as Hyang was about to speak, General Choi suddenly had an idea. His eyes lit up as he shouted, "What if we carve grooves inside the barrel?" "Grooves?" Yi Cheon asked. General Choi nodded and pointed to a small stream nearby. "Look at the flow of that stream. Water follows the curves of the land. The fire from gunpowder must also follow a path, right? If we carve grooves into the barrel, maybe the residue can follow the flow of the fire and be pushed out." Yi Cheon paused for a moment, then his eyes lit up. That actually makes sense. Hyang, listening to their conversation, smiled with satisfaction. "Looks like I don't need to step in this time." But then, a craftsman suddenly interrupted them. "But General, how exactly are we supposed to carve grooves inside the barrel?" The excitement that had just begun instantly faded. With a frustrated look, General Choi muttered, "We're back to square one." Hyang gave a wry smile. This journey is still far from over. The craftsmen worked tirelessly for days, experimenting until they finally succeeded in developing a tool to carve grooves inside the barrels. They began producing rifles with different groove counts, ranging from 3 to 15. However, in the next round of testing, General Choi and Jang Yong-sil encountered a new problem. Yi Cheon sighed and said to the other officials, "So, in the end, we still have to clean the barrel?" Jung In-ji, looking concerned, asked, "So, how did the tests go?" Yi Cheon paused before answering. "Each groove count has its pros and cons. With 6 grooves or fewer, the firepower remains high, but residue builds up. With 9 or more, the residue is reduced, but the firepower drops significantly." Jung In-ji let out a sigh and asked, Then, is 9 grooves the best option?" Yi Cheon shook his head and added, "The problem is, with 9 grooves, the explosive force drops way too much." "What about 6 grooves?" Jung In-ji asked. Yi Cheon replied, "With 6, the residue problem still persists." He shook his head in frustration. If only there were a better way. Amid the confusion, the Crown Prince remained calm, quietly observing them. Will they be able to find the answer on their own this time? Suddenly, Jang Yong-sil stepped forward and said, "What if we made the grooves spiral-shaped?" His words stunned everyone. Upon hearing that, the Crown Prince smiled in satisfaction. "That's the solution I was hoping for," he thought to himself. He then stepped forward and asked, "Advisor Jang Yong-sil, could you explain in more detail?" "Yes, Your Highness. If the gunpowder's path is made spiral-shaped, the length of the passage inside the barrel increases. That way, even with just 6 grooves, the path is long enough to allow the residue to be expelled. And because the grooves are spiral, the explosive force won't be wasted." "That's it! This could actually work, Your Highness!" Yi Cheon exclaimed enthusiastically. The Crown Prince gave a faint smile. His eyes glowed with pride. They finally figured it out on their own. "I believe carving the grooves in a spiral shape is the key, Your Highness." Upon hearing that, the Crown Prince immediately gave a firm order. "Then begin testing right away." A series of trials commenced. Days passed, filled with experimentation, until they finally discovered the optimal design that delivered the best performance. This wasn't just a weapons test, it was a lesson in understanding maximum range and effective range. Unable to hide his excitement, Yi Cheon shouted, "Quick, record all the results and start grouping the data." Seeing everyone working so hard, filled with passion and dedication, the Crown Prince nodded with satisfaction. They truly get it. With the right environment, these people could outshine even Nobel Prize winners. He smiled faintly, his mind already racing with future plans. Hyang, with a sly grin, murmured to himself, "My little minions. Grow up quickly." At the same time, both Yi Cheon and Jang Yong-sil felt a sudden chill run down their spines. "Why do I suddenly feel goosebumps?" they murmured. Yi Cheon furrowed his brow as something caught his attention. He stared at the report in his hand and mumbled, "What does this mean?" Just then, General Choi Hae-sin happened to be passing by. Noticing the puzzled look on Yi Cheon's face, he stopped. "Is something wrong, sir?" he asked. "It's probably nothing serious, General Choi," Yi Cheon replied hesitantly. "But according to Advisor Jang Yong-sil's instructions, we didn't carve spiral grooves inside the musket barrels. And yet, somehow, the accuracy has improved dramatically. Isn't that strange? What do you think?" General Choi thought for a moment. "It is strange. Improved performance is great, but it's troubling if we don't understand why it's happening." Both men fell silent, lost in thought. Suddenly, a nearby craftsman spoke up, hesitantly. "Maybe the spiral grooves cause the bullet to spin as it's fired?" Yi Cheon and General Choi instantly turned toward him, surprised. "What do you mean? Explain," General Choi said. The craftsman swallowed nervously before continuing. "I used to make arrows. When I attached feathers to the shafts, I'd always tilt them slightly. That way, the arrow would spin in flight, making it fly straighter and resist the wind better." Yi Cheon's eyes widened. General Choi stood silent for a moment, before quickly grabbing pen and paper. They immediately began taking notes, making sure every detail was recorded. This discovery had to be reported to King Sejong. As King Sejong flipped through the pages of the report, his eyes lit up with interest. After reading it all, he couldn't help but exclaim, "Now I understand why the Crown Prince and his officials kept this secret. If the performance of this rifle were to leak, its techniques would surely be stolen." With unwavering resolve, the king gave an order. "Attendant, bring the furnace here, immediately. In that case, I suppose I should follow your lead as well." Without hesitation, he tossed the stack of classified documents into the roaring flames, burning them to ashes in order to protect the dynasty's secrets. The king then walked up to the Crown Prince and placed a proud hand on his shoulder. "You've worked hard, my son. This is a remarkable achievement." With deep respect, the Crown Prince bowed low. "This was only possible thanks to your generosity and wisdom, father." But then, the king's eyes shifted to the soldiers standing nearby. His gaze fell upon their clothing, so unfamiliar, so unlike anything he'd seen before. His mind slowly began to fill with questions. Now that I think about it, I should ask about their clothing. Isn't this something we often see at Area 51? Finally, King Sejong spoke up. "Is there anything else you wish to show me? If not, explain these outfits." General Choi quickly responded with respect. "There's one more thing we'd like to present, Your Majesty." He gave a signal. "Soldier, show it to His Majesty." With enthusiasm, General Choi continued, "Your Majesty, we'd like to introduce a new weapon, this time a horseback firearm." "A pistol!" King Sejong was stunned. "A pistol? Bring it here. I want to see it up close." When the weapon was handed over, the king weighed it in his hands, carefully inspecting every detail. His eyes landed on the 6 chambers. "Can this fire 6 shots in a row?" he asked, intrigued. The Crown Prince nodded. "That's right, father." "Really?" The king's eyes sparkled with excitement. Around him, the officials began murmuring in awe. "How did they create this without proper equipment?" one whispered. Feeling proud of this groundbreaking innovation, the Crown Prince explained, "This is one of the masterpieces from Area 51. The king's eyes sparkled even more at those words. Unable to hold back his curiosity, he gave a direct command. "I want to see how it's used." "Yes, Your Majesty." General Choi stepped forward, standing tall and confident, like a trained cowboy. In one swift motion, he drew the pistol from its holster. He raised it, aimed with precision, and pulled the trigger. 6 shots rang out in rapid succession. Each bullet tore through the air, striking its target with perfect accuracy. The officials watching were left in awe. "General Choi is truly the best of the best," one of them whispered in admiration. Meanwhile, Hyang could only offer a bitter smile. This achievement, which should have been credited to him, now seemed to be stolen by the general. The left minister stepped forward and asked, "May I inspect the target, Your Majesty?" General Choi nodded politely. "Of course." With permission granted, the left minister quickly ran to the target for a closer look. After carefully examining the impact points, each bullet hitting vital areas, he turned and reported to King Sejong, "Your Majesty, with this kind of power, any enemy within 73 meters would be sent straight to hell." The king was stunned. "Are you certain?" "I'm absolutely certain, Your Majesty." Unable to contain his excitement, the king was amazed by his followers' achievements. "You've truly accomplished something remarkable," he said enthusiastically. "Now I understand why the ministers keep praising you. You've worked incredibly hard." The Crown Prince bowed and replied humbly, "Your Majesty gives me too much credit." Still, the king's curiosity wasn't fully satisfied. "But Crown Prince, what about the armor?" The Crown Prince bowed slightly and replied, "Forgive me, father, but there's still one more weapon I haven't introduced yet." Once again, King Sejong's curiosity would have to wait. He said, "Crown Prince, the sun is about to set." But before he could finish, Hyang cut him off. "What I'm about to show you now is a firebomb." As if he had completely forgotten what he was just saying, King Sejong responded, "So, what if the sun is setting? Let's see it." Hyang chuckled softly. "Anyone can see. He's a true military weapons enthusiast." As they continued walking, the king began to notice just how far they'd traveled from the palace. "This place is quite far from the royal grounds," he commented. The Crown Prince quickly explained, "We needed a wide open space to test the firebomb, father." "What kind of firebomb requires an area this large? Did you cut down all the trees here?" The Crown Prince nodded. "Yes, father. We cleared the area completely to prevent any risk of fire." The Crown Prince then introduced the new weapon. "This is the firebomb we've recently developed. We propose calling it the Sky-Piercing Thunderous Strike." Immediately, the officials began whispering among themselves, discussing the name with great interest. "Thunderous Strike? Isn't that Jinshinro from the Jin dynasty?" The right minister added, "It seems so. I recall hearing that it resembles General Choi Museon's explosive cannon. Maybe they added thunderous because it uses a bowl-shaped rim." The Crown Prince stood on the edge of the field, observing with satisfaction. In his mind, he thought, "Even in another life, there's no way I'd miss moments this iconic. This is a true masterpiece." We shift to a moment earlier, during the design phase of the Thunderous Strike Bomb. Which one should we go with? Mark 1, Mark 2, or Mark 2A? The officials looked around in confusion. "What's a mark?" one of them asked. They glanced at one another, some of them sighing internally, already expecting strange terms like this to pop up again. One of them muttered under his breath, "Looks like we're not going home tonight." Yi Cheon finally stood up to clarify. "What the Crown Prince is referring to are arbitrary names I came up with, based on the function of the thunderous strike bomb. Mark 1 kills enemies with shrapnel flying in all directions when the gunpowder explodes. Mark 2, on the other hand, releases fire from the gunpowder chamber when ignited, causing flames to spin outward and scatter both fire and caltrops in every direction. Mark 2, A uses an iron plate to seal the gunpowder chamber before releasing fire and caltrops in a more concentrated burst." The Crown Prince immediately cut in with a sharp tone. "Then which one is the most effective?" Jung-cho began to reply. "Your Highness, in my opinion..." But before he could finish, Jang Young-sil quickly covered his mouth. "Forgive me, sir, but please, let's wait just a moment." The Crown Prince suddenly slammed the table, his anger boiling over. "Why are we still debating this? I've decided. We're going with Mark 2A. This military meeting is over. Everyone, take a break." The shocked officials quickly asked, "But what about you, Your Highness?" The Crown Prince grinned, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "I just had a brilliant idea. There's no way I can sit still now. You're only getting in my way. Dismissed." Jang Young-sil, pleased that his plan had worked, smiled and said, "Come on, gentlemen." The Crown Prince already has everything under control. The scene transitions. In the open field, King Sejong stared intently at the firebomb lying on the table. His eyes narrowed, clearly filled with doubt. "Did you really develop this yourselves?" he asked. General Choi respectfully replied, "Yes, Your Majesty." The Crown Prince personally designed it, from concept to final form. King Sejong's curiosity grew. "Is that so? I'd like to understand how it works." But General Choi hesitated to respond. The Crown Prince, Hyang, quickly interjected. "Please allow us to explain everything after the demonstration, Father." Two soldiers rushed forward, pulling a large cannon into the field. With a serious tone, General Choi warned the king and his officials, "This is dangerous. Please take cover behind the wall." The soldiers carefully loaded the firebomb into the cannon's barrel, then quickly took shelter behind a barricade, waiting for the signal. From a distance, a soldier shouted, "Fire!" The cannon was ignited, and with a deafening roar, the projectile shot out like a rocket, packed with immense destructive power. The king watched anxiously. But after a few moments, nothing happened. He frowned and turned to General Choi. "Why hasn't anything exploded?" Remaining calm, General Choi replied, "It'll detonate soon, Your Majesty." Just as the projectile reached the center of the target area, it began to slow down. Then suddenly, boom! A massive explosion shook the entire area. The officials watching were left speechless, their jaws dropping at the overwhelming force. As the blinding light faded, thick black smoke slowly cleared, revealing nothing left of the target dummies but scattered, shattered remains. A concerned official quickly asked, "Your Majesty, are you all right?" Still shaken, King Sejong coughed lightly and replied, "I'm fine, just a bit startled." The official bowed respectfully. "You may stand now, Your Majesty." Another official, still in shock, muttered, "How is it possible for the blast to be that strong?" That was terrifying. The explosion had utterly obliterated the entire set of target dummies, leaving no trace behind. King Sejong, still trying to process what he had just witnessed, finally exclaimed, "How is this possible? Is this really the power of a single firebomb?" The left minister added, "If this were a real battlefield, this place would have turned into hell." Driven by curiosity, the king turned to General Choi and ordered, "Tell me, how does the thunderous strike actually work?" General Choi responded, "Yes, Your Majesty. First, we crafted the bomb's outer shell to be as thin as possible, just strong enough to survive being fired and landing, but weak enough to explode with maximum impact. Inside, we filled it with small iron balls to increase the number of deadly fragments, boosting its lethality. Finally, we removed clay from the gunpowder mix to ensure a cleaner, more powerful explosion." "Incredible," the king said. "Your efforts deserve high praise. But tell me, can this kind of bomb be mass-produced?" Pleased by the question, General Choi answered immediately, "If we have a steady supply of gunpowder, then yes, mass production is absolutely possible, Your Majesty." However, another official, still skeptical, asked, "General, are you sure? To produce such powerful bombs on a large scale, we'll need a lot of skilled craftsmen. Isn't Area 51 already short on manpower?" General Choi nodded in agreement. "You're right. That is a very accurate concern. This video ends here, but the story isn't over yet. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next part.